So this is a program in education and leadership, right? Educational leadership. So here's a challenge to your students and to us as colleagues. What do we do as creative leaders? Because some point someone's going to hand you a job and you don't really know totally what you're going to do about it. What do we do to essentially, if you're on an administrative path and that's the direction your career is going, what are you going to do to build your craft? And I use that word carefully, that essentially administration is not just a teacher promoted to an administrative position. There becomes an element of a specific craft that you have to develop. And for the first couple of years, when I had minor roles like assistant deans or lower order deans, I really didn't take this into account. But here is my five or six that I think you really have to work on, and you do it intentionally and you do it iteratively, meaning the work never stops, and you got to take it on seriously. The first is that you learn to write. You have to write well. You have to learn to express yourself succinctly, clearly, authentically, and so forth. Not easy because writing is a heck of a chore. So do everything you can to learn to write well. Why? Because you're going to be issuing memos. You're going to be sending letters to donors. You're going to be communicating with authorities, and being able to write well and communicate as effectively. The second is public speaking. Many people who are on the administrative path have never studied public speaking. Like, how do you become a better public speaker? At one point, I realized that I was not going to ever go back to a faculty position. So I was really, in a way, stuck being an administrator, and I better get really good at it. So I assigned people to be critics of my talks when I talked with the faculty. And I also recorded my talks personally so that I could listen to the way I use silence, the way I use gesture, all of the active performative elements that an actor knows. But again, it's a craft that you need to develop. A third one is group skills. You cannot work with, and Dr. Bazzini knows, you can't work in an educational organization unless you really know about groups and you have some understanding of how to work with a group and how to build a team around out of that group. Because creative ideas by themselves don't work if you're the Lone Ranger and you just spout creative idea. You have to build that within a team context. A fourth one is, and I learned this the hard way, talk less, listen more. Particularly if you have power. The more powerful you are, talk less, because people don't want to hear you too much. They want to hear themselves talk. So it's much better to try to practice that. I was going to try to figure out a ratio, but I didn't get there. Another one is manage the stress. And I think Dr. Bazzini really mentioned this when she talked about how when the pandemic hit the school system, it really pushed them hard. There are no easy administrative jobs that I know about. If you're in a leadership position, you're up against it. And when you're a college president, you're working sometimes 60, 70 hours a week. And you had best learn to cut back on alcohol, don't smoke, learn to exercise, stay with your family, find friends, all of the stress reduction methods, because the job is going to kill you otherwise. And you are not then very effective for the organization. Last one, critical thinking. I think you could take this on deliberately. You could study the Kabbalah, you could study any text and look for um, challenge the words. What do these words mean? What does creativity mean? What do we mean by transformation? What do we mean by leadership? But I mean, that's a deliberative, intentional, and iterative process. I try to read the best writing I can find and the most critical thinking, particularly in certain kinds of philosophy, because it's not my natural strength and I need to push my head out in different ways. Okay. So leadership is a craft. If you want to be creative, learn the craft.